Among your castmates, were there any particular actors in the cast that you enjoyed working with, doing scenes with?
Well, Allison Janney, of course. I think she and I kind of developed a little symbiotic connection. Like we kind of were soulmates on the set, and partly because we were becoming such dear friends off the set. But it was interesting that Toby and CJ, whenever she had a really tough emotional scene, somehow it would end up being with Toby, and she would say, I couldn't do this with anyone else. I couldn't do it. And then I would have one, 6 months later or something. I think I remember one where my brother died or something, and I was sitting in my office and losing it. And CJ or Allison was the only one I could imagine revealing that to, because it was so vulnerable. But Allison is just such a phenomenal actress. But John Spencer and I would often do scenes, and he once said, and I often thought it, but he said it, he went, "Oh my God, I completely forgot we were acting." And I would notice that I would never even pay attention, notice, or remember who was on camera when I was working with John. We had a way, obviously when it was just the two of us, but when there were other people around, you become more aware of stuff. But whatever intimate or personal or important scenes that he and I had together, and there's one that comes to mind as we speak, I always felt like, I just love working with this guy because he was just as good, if not better, off camera, which is very rare. And I prided myself in being that way, that I would always be equally there, if not more so, off camera, because you can be that much more present since there's no self-consciousness. There's no worry about whether you're going to get what you've been working on. You're just there. And I would often wish that I had, the camera was rolling after a scene off camera. And with John, I never even worried about it because he was so present that you didn't have to worry about whether you were on or not. It would happen either way,
Let's talk about some of the episodes that helped to define the character.
But by the way, about John, no one loved acting more than he did. He was really special that way. I have a love-hate relationship with this stuff, and I always admired him because he adored every second of it. He loved the makeup. He loved wearing slippers into the makeup trailer and a robe and the little patches he had on his eyes for 2 hours every morning, and the gossip, and yet on Thursday morning when he showed up for work, he would attack you. "Oh my God, that scene, you were so brilliant." Martin too, but John, it was led by John. John was the main cheerleader. He loved actors, and he loved acting, and nothing made him happier than to see another actor do something special.
Sounds like you had great passion. About some of the episodes that defined your character. In the first season, and I want to get your take on them, in Excelsius Deo, I think it was around Christmas first season, where your character, I guess, discovers a homeless vet, and you kind of advocate to get him a proper send-off and funeral. How significant was that for your character and then for you in the show?
Well, it was significant in many ways because the first pass at that script, which we read at a table read, I was pretty upset with. It was written, not by Aaron, but it was written in a way that made Toby kind of cantankerous, and some of the adjectives that people use to describe him which everyone working on our show knew not to be true. And yet, this particular script was written in a way where you saw the kind of negative side of him undeservedly. It didn't make any sense. He didn't want to help this guy. He was kind of forced into it, the way it was written. And I had not... We had been on the air just a couple of months, and I went into a panic. I went, is this... We'd have been on the air a couple of months, and I went into a panic because I was wondering, is this how America is seeing my character? Because this isn't who I am. I got really upset. I remember we were in a van after we went to the table read, and Allison said, "Wow, that's a really good episode for you." And I blew up. I went into a rage. And then Tommy found out that I was upset and came down to the trailers. He said, I hear you're upset. And then I started crying. And he said, don't worry, we'll fix it. We'll fix it. I completely get it. It's not who this character is. We're going to fix it. And then Aaron found out I was upset, and he came down. And he said, I hear you're upset. And I started crying again. Because I was really in a panic that the character had been misinterpreted the first few episodes. And because of all that, though, we kind of got together and solved this problem. And it became, I think, the fans voted it their favorite episode, that and the pilot of the 7 years. But it was a good example of what people come together to try to solve problems, what can happen when you trust each other. And so it was important on that level, because if I didn't have the trust of Tommy and Aaron already, which I think I did, that kind of confirmed it. And if I didn't have their trust, now if they didn't have my trust, that was certainly earned on that experience. But it became it was interesting because this is, I think the Emmy was for this role, the one that I won, and for this episode, and yet it wasn't about Toby, which I love. It was about the guy on the bench and his brother. It wasn't some self-afflicted issue, some personal thing. It was only about how Toby deals with this. That actor who played the cop in the park, I just ran into him recently. He was on The Wire for a while. He was the captain in The Wire. And we just talked about that. See, he didn't think I'd remember him, but I did. It was just, it was very emotional. It was a very tough episode to do. We stole some shots in the Korean Memorial, which we were not allowed to do. I don't know why, but I was very moved by what Toby had to do in that episode, seeing this dead man with a tattoo, and then going to the kiosk, and there was a lovely actor who was a real vet at a kiosk in D.C., and that kiosk is still there whenever I pass it, right by the Korean Memorial, and he was selling the souvenirs, if you will. And this actor was so perfect, and I almost lost it just doing that scene, asking if he knew where this guy's brother was, because I found out he had a brother, or he told me that he had a brother or something. Then I went onto the highway and found the brother, played by I forgot his name, but the most important thing is something that Tommy might mention if he was here, because it was his favorite moment of Toby. And it's something that I discovered about my character. One of the things I have to say to the homeless man's brother, who's also homeless and slow, so he doesn't quite understand what I'm saying, that his brother has died, and that I want to give him a funeral at Arlington, a hero's funeral, a soldier's funeral. And I wasn't getting through to him, and the line was something like, "You don't understand, I'm a very important man." And it came out every take where I was embarrassed to even say the words. So I would kind of throw it away. But I was embarrassed to say, "Hey, I'm a hotshot, I can get this done." And it informed, I think, the next years who this guy was, because he was someone that, I don't know how to describe it. It's not a verbal thing. The fact that I couldn't say those words without being embarrassed by them informed a lot about who he was, right. Who he is, was.
You mentioned winning an Emmy. What was that like at that point in your career, early on in the new series?
Yeah, it was weird. It was just weird. I don't get the award thing at all. It was weird.
Did you have any expectation, or was it just?
I didn't really think that much about it. My managers were, you're going to get nominated, you're going to get nominated, and they were taking ads out, and I was like, oh, that's weird. And then I didn't even have a speech. I didn't think about it, and then Allison won, and I went, oh man, I might win. And then I won, and I just disappeared off the face of the earth as I was talking up there. I said something good, I think, because the White House writers all sent me a note saying, we really loved what you said. Because I said something about the writing. I remember saying something about, I always thought I'd missed my era. I thought I should have been in the time of Odets and O'Neill and those guys. But of course, I forgot to thank my wife, which really went over well. That was fun. But I kind of lost myself in there, and in the middle of it, I went, let me get out of here. It's just so surreal, and people say it up there, and they're very smart to say it because they acknowledge how weird it is. But you're up there in front of thousands of people, and then a billion are watching on television or some insane number, and you're getting all this attention, and unless you're used to it. Unless you're used to it. Unless you've been around it, and John Spencer had been on 3 TV shows already. Brad had been working since he was 2. Allison actually is freaked out a little bit by it all, but kind of loves the adulation, and as she well deserved, and as she should enjoy it. And I just didn't get it. I just didn't. I didn't pay attention to the numbers. I didn't pay attention to the reviews. I didn't read anything about it. I was just doing work. And so when I first went out into the world that summer and was inundated with attention, because, Warner Brothers is like a prison camp. I mean, you don't get out there. Right? We were there 80 hours a week. And then once the summer came, and I was like, it freaked me out. I wasn't used to it. And the Emmys came right after that. And I was just a little bit overwhelmed by it all. Now I have the experience. I started acting late. I didn't start acting till I was in my 30s. So this was still relatively new in my career in terms of actual experience. And I didn't think about it. I had never thought about it. And I think you need to have a while understanding, putting it in its proper place in order to deal with it. It's like a young star who doesn't know how to deal with stardom, or it's, a baseball player's on the cover of Sports Illustrated because he had a good week, and the next thing you know, he can't hit a curveball. The attention is not an easy subject. It's not. Everyone assumes, oh wow, he got all this adulation, and it's not so much. It's you got to be the right personality to love it, and it takes some experience to learn how to deal with it if you don't love it.
An episode called 17.
It's a really long answer.
It was a good answer, though. Good answer. An episode called 17 People, you confront President Bartlet about the fact that he had MS and didn't disclose it. Does that somewhat define the character of Toby, that he had this, as you called it, that he was described as being the conscience of the White House, but that it's a larger issue about the honesty of what the president was dealing with?
Well, the honesty of that issue had a lot of ramifications, some very heavy ramifications. As Toby says in the speech at the very end, as he's blowing up, trying to contain the lid on his rage, what he was furious about was that there was a virtual coup d'etat because he was down and no one was the president of the United States for a significant amount of time. And that's illegal, I think. Richard thinks so. I don't know, Toby. But you know, you can't do that. First of all, lying to the public is one thing, but not revealing it at a point of crisis when you are incapacitated and you're the president of the United States to maintain the lie is what freaked Toby out. There was no one at the head of the table for a certain amount of time, and you know, and I think again it goes to beyond the personal with Toby. It goes to what's right and what's the right thing to do. Well, you could have lied about this to get elected, and you could have lied about this to keep people from worrying. But once it becomes real, that's when the lies have to stop. I don't think he cared that much about the earlier lies. He might have brought it up, you know, and said, you know, we really shouldn't be doing that. But it was because at the moment of crisis, the lies were maintained that I think gave him the license to rail against the president there.
What were some of the trademark, did Toby have trademark lines? It certainly had trademark kind of quirks in the way that you acted.
I don't remember the
Are there certain things you did, any patterns that you kept consistent with in your performance?
I don't remember them so much. I don't remember the acting so much. I remember how things felt. I do remember one of one of the interesting things anyway in the pilot. Very early on, the very first rehearsal. It goes to what we were just talking about what gave Toby license to rail. It wasn't just that somebody lied and he's an honest guy and he gets pissed off because people lie. It's the specific circumstances and the maintenance of the lie that crosses the line for him. In the pilot, it was written in the Christian right scene that Toby's negotiating a peace between Josh, who had a faux pas on one of those pundit shows, and they were coming for an apology, and I was going to be the peacemaker. And then I get angry at the Christian right because she starts telling these, that New York sense of humor, she says, or that whatever. And it's written that Toby flips out on her. And at the rehearsal, the very first rehearsal, I said to Tommy and Aaron, I said, I don't understand why I'm flipping out on this lady. And Tommy, they're both frantic because they know they're about to have the biggest hit in the history of television in their minds, And they're like, no. And Tommy goes, he's got a Judah button, Judah button. And I go, what? What's a Judah button? What do you mean? And he goes, anybody says anything about Jews and it's a Judah button, and he just goes nuts and he just goes off on them. And I said, no. I said, Toby's been exposed to anti-Semitism everywhere, whether it's New York or out in the sticks, it's not anti-Semitism. It's not this woman doesn't like Jews, therefore I'll rip her throat out. No, there's got to be a reason beyond that. Well, I said, no, she has got to want to take advantage of this. She's got to try to get some benefit from this. Negotiate something out of this so that politically she's motivated. And that's what created a beat in that scene where Aaron wrote, the apology happens, and then she turns to me and she says, "Okay, let's deal." And I remember doing a double take, and I went, "I'm sorry? Let's deal. What do you got for us?" And that's when Toby went off on her, because she wants to take advantage of her anti-Semitism. She wants to take advantage of someone's mistake, and so she's abusing it. And that's so the key for me with Toby was always finding a deeper reason for acting, that there wasn't just he's this way, therefore. And writers, not as good as Aaron, some of them will write, oh, he's cranky, therefore he'll be cranky. No. He's dark, therefore he'll be dark. No, he's not just dark. He goes dark when there's a reason for it, But I don't know about quirks and such things. I remember Toby was a certain way, and I'm really happy that he's no longer in my body, because my body was heavier with him, and he was hard to carry around for all those years. He was really hard to carry around.
Do you know where the name Toby came from for the character?
No.
Okay. How much are you similar to Toby? Are you similar to Toby, or were you then?
Well, I'm a lot better looking than he is. Let's face the facts. I think the similarities come in that certain things are very important to me, and I will fight to the death for those things. And one of them is maintaining an integrity in what I do creatively, which isn't always possible, but it's certainly something I try to do. And I think that I translated that into Toby's work, and that Toby, it was very important for him to do, to maintain integrity in what he did, and that he did it for the right reason. So I think that's similar. And obviously, I can have a somewhat cutting sense of humor, and I think Toby did as well. And I think Aaron picked that up from me and his own sense of humor, and we combined it and stuff. But as my wife likes to think, I'm a lot lighter. I can go dark, obviously, because you have to be able to go dark with a character, and I can get that way. But when you're doing a television series, unless you're Larry Drake, where you're playing a retarded guy, or you're really, really different, most writers want to use what they can see in front of them, because they have to write again and again and again. So he wrote, Toby's a Yankee fan. Why? Because I showed up to work with a Yankee hat every day. I think I'll make him a Yankee fan. Oh, okay. You'd heard a story of my grandfather was part of Murder Incorporated, and I had gone to him with pitching a story that Toby was embarrassed about his father, and that his father came to the White House, and I had Roy Cohn in mind, something political, and he said, "I remember that story you told me about your grandfather. Can I use that?" So he did this episode where. Starts in Yiddish, and Toby's father is pronouncing the fact that his son was born. His name is Tobias. Okay, let's go kill this guy. And that, so he'll take stuff from where he can get it. It's like, Day for Night. Remember the Truffaut movie? And the actress has come to Truffaut. Truffaut played Truffaut, or I forget now, or is it Pierre Lowe who played Truffaut? Yeah. No, Pierre Lowe was the actor. Whatever. I think Truffaut played himself. And so an actress comes to the director and starts crying and says, "I had this horrible thing with the actor, and now we're broken up," or whatever. And then the next day she comes to work and she's looking at her new lines, brand new lines, living off the set, and it's exactly verbatim what she had just told the director last night, and that's the scene she was now asked to play. a case in point where you take from life as much as you need to. And I don't think Aaron, certainly running 44 hours of television 1 year, or not 2 years, took what he can. So you start to fuse, you know. You know, Brad certainly is frivolous and fun, and so that character was fun. And Allison, you know, is a little bit, has some neuroses here and there that's palpable. We all have it, but she wears hers on our sleeve. And so CJ became, you know, a kind of high-voltage Mary Tyler Moore at times, you know. And Martin has, you know, the heart of a lion and a lamb at the same time. And Aaron used that. You know, Martin, if I haven't said it yet, Martin is the best human being I've ever met. I was speaking at Oxford recently, because I work in England a lot nowadays, and I was asked to speak there. And they had asked me, it was a question and answer after I spoke, and someone asked me about Martin Sheen, and I said, because they're into their religious studies up there, and I said, if Jesus Christ were alive today, he would point to Martin Sheen and say, that's what I was talking about. And Aaron knew to use that. You know, the death penalty scene where Martin has to struggle with his real beliefs and juxtaposed against the more practical political necessities. And Martin was just so beautiful in that episode, as he was in every episode. You know, so point being is that the writer has to fuse the character and the person eventually, because it's too much of a factory to go, wait a second, that's a character, you know, I'm taller and I'm supposed to be taller. You know, you can't really do that after a while.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, people really believed you. I mean, they, you know,
I got that.
They believed you. Were you, at least at that time, did the show make you interested in politics, or were you ever interested in politics?
Well, I was interested socially in politics. In other words, I didn't believe in mainstream politics, but I was interested in it. And I would be on the street. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd be demonstrating and stuff. I had no faith in it whatsoever.
But you kept informed about it, is that right?
Well, I didn't keep informed of the minutia and the policy, right, which mainstream politics keeps you interested in. Because I didn't have faith that anything that they were doing was valid. That changed as I got older, and as I got to know Washington more, and as I got to meet the real people. I started to believe that there were some good people there, especially the younger staffers who I would go out drinking with. And I met some very, very good people who were in office. You know, Tom Leahy from Vermont, and quite a few others, Ted Kennedy, and so I now find it. First of all, people in D.C. aren't that bright, so they actually think I'm Toby Ziegler. So I can go there and have a voice. I actually have a legitimate voice in D.C., which, you know, is ridiculous, but that's the reality. So I find it the responsible thing to do, getting back to responsibility, to take advantage of that.
The gravitas that you have.
Well, no, but to take advantage of the fact that they think I have gravitas, or that they think that I'm Toby, or that I have some kind of validity in the arena, to speak on issues and to call attention to the voices that really should be heard. So I'll go to the Congress and say, you really should, I'll lobby in Congress right, you know, just 2 weeks ago. You really should listen to this. I'll go into someone's office. Oh, hi, I watched you all over. Yeah, okay. It's a pleasure to meet you. Listen to this story. And here's why you should, blah, blah, blah. So I do a lot of that now. And so I know D.C. fairly well. I go there fairly often.
As the show moved through its life, against the real-time presidency, the end of the Clinton years into the Bush years. And Bush was often perceived as someone who wasn't necessarily the smartest guy, or certainly the most intellectual guy. Do you think the show played against that at all in terms of sort of embracing intellect? I mean, we had Bartlett was an intellectual president, and your character certainly.
Well, Aaron certainly made a point to that. I mean, I think there's a number of discussions about, it's okay. I mean, what is wrong with being smart? Because the media, was there was a trend towards, not trusting intellectuals or not trusting intelligence, or the president should be someone you could pop a beer with, and all of that stuff. And Aaron took that very personally, I think, and wrote a lot about that. And I think we made a mistake in making our first re-election against someone who was a little too much the cliche that Bush became, or at least the image that some of us had of him. Because I personally thought he was a lot smarter and more dangerous than we portrayed our opponent to be, clearly in the Bush, league. But in real life, that's really dangerous, as we've seen, really dangerous. And we didn't deal with that aspect of it as much as I think we could have. We made it a landslide victory, for instance. Like, it's got to be obvious that the man with the heart and the brain is better than the guy who pops a good beer. But it's too easy. I think that was too easy. It was wishful thinking on Aaron's part. I want to just landslide him. I just want to put him out. I just want to bury him. So that's understandable.
Over the course of the series, in what significant way did the character of Toby change?
Well, he, wanted to have a family, and got a little bit more into his personal life with his ex-wife, and then he had twins, and then he started talking about babies with hats. There was that. I certainly tried to lighten him up a little bit, because after the years there, I thought maybe there was a familiarity enough to find moments of releasing the pressure. I don't know how successful I was. I didn't watch too many of those. After Aaron and Tommy left, I think we had some problems. Aaron and Tommy really got Toby. And despite, I think, their very best efforts, I don't think the next team ever really got him. And so it became a difficult transition to go into year 5.
Was that a shock to the system, to you personally, when Tommy Schlamme and Aaron Sorkin left?
I understood it, because I had pitched to them earlier, half a year earlier. I said, if we have a brain in our head, we'll lose re-election. Let's get out of here after 4 years. Let's get out. Yeah. Let's go out on top, A, as creators, but B, what a great idea. Let's lose. And they went, yeah, that's actually a great idea, but the network will never let you do it, or the studio will never let you do it. Well, they can get another administration in here. What do you mean? They won't do it because they want you guys to be, all right, I'll go Republican. I don't care. Let's just, it was such a good idea to me to lose. Now, I understand all the politics involved with Aaron and Aaron specifically. And, it was the right choice for him to leave, and it was the right choice for Tommy to go with him. It was unfortunate for me in particular, and for some of us. And others adjusted great. I think Brad was fine, and, I think John was okay, and Martin was okay. I think Toby was a very difficult character to get. And I was tapping, I think, into Aaron's other side, and he appreciated it, I think. And Tommy appreciated it. And, you know, we had Deborah Kahn, who was one of our writers, and Eli Addy certainly got Toby, but I think the rest had trouble. And so they'd write, and Toby's cranky. And that just pissed me off. So at times wasn't the happiest arrangement.
9/11 paralyzed the country, and obviously the show was shut down, like everything was shut down pretty much for a while there. Where were you when 9/11 happened?
I was asleep in my house in L.A., and my wife screaming woke me up.
Did you have any expectation of how the show The West Wing would respond to that?
No, I had no expectation, and I was, you know, I think you're coming to Aaron's episode, I think Isaac and Ishmael, which I didn't like, but I had great respect for Aaron's desire to do it. Really great respect for that. I thought it was a little patronizing because it was explaining a historical conflict that is inexplicable. I mean, flying 2 stories above our heads.
I want a jet fighter.
Yeah, I thought the episode was patronizing isn't the right word because it wasn't condescending, I don't think, but it was trying to really help people understand in a very good way. I think it was too simple for my tastes, but Aaron, as an artist, felt compelled to do it, to deal with it directly. And man, that not only is that courageous, but it's just great on so many levels. It's just great. Doesn't matter whether I liked it or not. Doesn't matter whether half of America loved it and half of America hated it. The fact that he did it gets my respect.
Do you think, even if you're going to attempt to do that and deal with that issue, with you know what happened, the fact that it made no really specific references to 9/11, did that seem like the right approach? I mean, to make it more kind of...
Yeah, you have to. I mean, it was
in a
literally
fictional world. It
was stepping out of our world and dealing with the real world. And in many ways, it was an analogy or an example of what we really had to do with our show. Because our show changed also. We're no longer romantic comedy, Preston Sturges, you know, Frank Capra. We now have to deal with the real world, which I think changed our show forever. Even after Isaac and Ishmael, because we now had terrorist attacks, and we now had lockdowns in the White House, and we now had a different kind of sense of what's at stake in the world, and people could no longer just watch us and go, wouldn't this be cool if these guys were in the White House, without dealing with the real world. You know, I think it changed the course of our history, of the show's history, because I think it shortened the life of the show.
What was the set like when you came back to work for that episode after that, the first time back?
The set is not in my mind. I just remember my house, and I remember calling people in New York and checking on them. And talking about it to Tommy, in particular. I don't remember the set.
The West Wing had one of its signatures was that it dealt with stories that were, you know, like they say, just yanked right out of the headlines. I mean, real political issues, whether they were allegorical or whatever. Do any of those stand out in your mind? Anything that they covered that you thought was done really, really well in terms of either making a statement or helping to explain things that were going on in Washington in real life?
Well, the thing that comes to mind is there was an episode where Toby solved Social Security. I don't remember the name of it, but I remember having to, you know, we had amazing consultants. I mean, Lawrence O'Donnell and Pat Goodell and you know, and Gene Sperling, who I just saw at the Correspondents' Dinner in D.C., and Dee Dee Meyer, you know, all these people, Pat Noonan, all these people. And this episode came along, and I called a conference of our advisors. I said, taking the line from Philadelphia Story, explain this to me like I'm 5 years old. What is the issue with Social Security? Why do all these people have different numbers? Why, when somebody says, no, we can do this, somebody else says, no, you can't, and this is why. And then they go, yes, you can, and this is why, and this is why. And none of the numbers ever mesh. What's going on here? So they took a half an hour to try to explain it to me. And I still didn't get it. So I said, okay, I'm going to have to do this episode like it's Greek, and I'm just going to do it phonetically and hope that we can get through it. Because I did not understand what I had solved, how, and why. I just never got it. And sure enough, I got a letter about a week or two after it aired, delineating first of all saying, thank you so much for your attempt at dealing with this very difficult issue. Here are 10 reasons why your plan will not work. Signed at the bottom, Senator from New York, Hillary Rodham Clinton. Which was an interesting letter to get. It wasn't my plan. It was Toby's plan. I didn't write that. But you know, case in point, here we tried to deal with a very difficult issue. Tried to solve it, in fact. Try to make it appear as if it's, you know, it's not that hard. And yet, you know, people are writing to us going, no.
Along those lines, though, how did it feel when you spoke? You know, you get a letter from Hillary Clinton. Real politicos, movers and shakers in Washington, early on, especially in the series.
Oh, still
they were like
now.
all over you guys. They were fans of you.
No, they're still now. I just came back from D.C. and it, you know, everybody watches them and watches them again. And because of the last election, they watched it all over again. It doesn't stop over there. And all of the, you know, just on a little tangent, I was on the campaign trail and going to all the debates during the campaign, the recent one, with Obama. I was actually campaigning for Joe Biden because I'd met him and really liked him, wanted to keep his voice in the debate because he was so far behind that he had no problem speaking the truth, which I loved. And I liked the guy. And anyway, I was at all the debates, and wherever I went, the Obama army would surround me, as they would anyone from the West Wing. I mean, we're basically Elvis Presley in Memphis when we're around these people. I mean, you go to the Democratic Convention, and it's literally Elvis's return to Memphis. And so they're all fanatics. And I started to realize, you know, all these are, I mean, tens and tens and tens, if not hundreds, of Obama people at every stop, surrounding me, taking pictures, talking politics. Have you met him? Do you want to meet him? I love you. And I would go, if I meet him, I'll switch. So no, thank you. And I slowly began to realize, they kept saying, you know, you're the reason why I'm doing this, meaning why I'm actively helping a campaign. And I heard it again and again and again. Well, after history was made and I look back on it and I realize Obama does not win this election without the tens of thousands of young volunteers that gave up their lives for 6 months to canvass door to door in places far away from home. And if I were to do a survey, you know, 99% of them had said, you know, we're doing this because of the West Wing. That's pretty remarkable. After the 2004 election, when Bush actually won, and by a significant margin, I thought, you know, because people say, what is your impact? What is the West Wing's impact on culture and politics? I would say negative. Because look what happened. Democrats actually won the 2000 election. They lost the 2004 election. So we're having a negative impact. We're going backwards. And then but an entire generation of teenagers were watching the show, apparently, and it had, going back to the very first paragraph of our discussion, moved them to do something. People get moved to do something. They don't just get moved emotionally. And these kids were moved to take action because of what they saw on our show. And I think that's a remarkable accomplishment on the part of Aaron and those guys, because I think that's what, if Aaron were to imagine the best possible response other than fame and fortune, it would be getting the next generation activated.
But as a key member of the ensemble, as an actor, in this kind of surreal world that you venture out into and get this kind of Elvis response, is it a point of pride for you that what you have done to contribute to that has changed the lives of people?
Well, I can't take that kind of credit, personally. It's a point of fascination, and it makes me a little bit more proud of what we did as a team for 7 years. You know, and you got to give some credit to the next team that took over after Aaron and Tommy, because they're the ones that portrayed the election and based that character on a young Obama, not realizing that Obama was going to be the real guy, and did a mock, you know, a fictional election with basically Obama and McCain as the main characters, Alan Alda, Jimmy Smits, Santos, and, you know. So give credit to John Wells and those guys for doing that, because that created a runway of fiction that allowed people to think in those terms, I think, a little bit. But it does make me wonder about the impact that our creative culture can have on our real culture and our society. It's possible to move people to do stuff, and it's possible to challenge people to think of a different, if not better, world. And we accomplished that on some level. That's pretty cool.
The show was pretty well established, and your character was, and then you had the opportunity to direct a couple of episodes. Was that something that you wanted to do, and how did you approach it with something that had been established?
Well, it was very clear that to everyone that I, you know, had the kind of acumen and the ability to direct. Tommy would ask me very early on during our run, you know, when are you going to direct? Because I was always looking at it from that perspective. I still do. I mean, I look at it, I work backwards. I see it from a director's point of view, and then I work inside out to accomplish what I see, but it's changed by the time it comes out. In anything that I do, I'm just kind of cursed and blessed at the same time that way. And also, I was, because I kept giving away stuff, kind of caught the attention of Aaron and Tommy, because most actors are like, wait, I want that. And I was like, wait, give that to that person. So I immediately got their trust, because I wasn't a greedy actor. But it was also because, for the sake of the story, it made more sense. So I had a good sense of story, and I was always asking questions about the visuals, and but I kept putting it off for a number of reasons, and I regret putting it off until after Tommy left, because Tommy is a fantastic mentor and a great teacher. And he was gone by the time I said, you know what, before this is over, I really should direct one. So that was unfortunate for me, because he's such a great teacher. But I still went to him and talked to him about the script, and he was helpful anyway. But the approach was, you know, I knew I already had the trust of the actors. I mean, in my way, it helped people through various acting crises, or protected them against directors that were kind of not knowing what they were doing. But the visuals of that show is tough, and it's a crew of 200 plus, and there's a lot to prep for. And I'm a theater. I've directed in theater. I had my own theater company for 10 years and was a director. But it's a different medium, and as much as I've been around it, I just don't quite, for at least at that first time, got completely had to prep as much as I would as an actor, know exactly how to do it. But I had Andrew Bernstein, who's now a very, very accomplished director, who was helping me, and because of the way he helped me, I recommended to John Wells numerous times, let this guy direct, let this guy direct. I'm telling you, let this guy direct, because he was so helpful and so creative as an assistant director and visual and just great. I really like Andrew Bernstein. And so I had that help, and I had the cast who, because I knew I was going to be a little slower, I asked them if they'd come in on a day off because I had this idea for a shot. I wanted to do the teaser in one shot. And they all went, yes. And they came in for 4 hours, and we staged the whole Oval Office. And I staged my whole first shot into the Oval Office. And as a result, my first day was my best day because I had already blocked it. We had already rehearsed it. I already knew the camera moves. A very complicated shot, great shot. And that all worked really well. And then I had an actor named a writer named Eli Addy, who was a fantastic writer and a good friend. And we went out, 3, 4 times and went over the script, and it was great working on that script to get it where we wanted to get. And we did well, I thought. Second time around, not as good. More difficulty with the script. Didn't quite get it. Didn't work well with that writer. And plus, my feeling about The West Wing had changed, and they were beginning to portray Toby in a way that made no sense to me. So I was like, I think half foot was already out the door. But great crew. I mean, and Tom Delruth, the first DP, phenomenal. A little bit nuts, but so are we all. I had his respect, and he certainly had mine, and fascinating man to work with because he's brilliant. He was gone by the second time around. So it was a little different. The second time it was already a show that was on its way out, and it had a different feel to it. And you didn't, it was at the point where let's just make your day, and it wasn't as much fun. I've since directed an In Treatment, which I really loved. It was more like a little play, and worked with Gabriel Byrne and Diane Wiest, and it was fantastic. So I might do a little bit more. We'll see.
Yeah, the 2 episodes you directed in 2004 was Talking Points, and then in 2005 it was called A Good Day. Did those shows just come up in rotation pretty much in terms of how they got assigned to you, or did you have any say, especially with Talking Points,
well, the first,
started choosing it?
No, I didn't get to choose it based on topic, but I did choose it based on, because I remember talking with Alex Graves, who was kind of running the show then, and we were trying to find a show that I was light in right before, because I had a prep, and that I would be light in it. So I only had one scene in that show. I don't know what happened, and so that was great because I got my time to prep. And something happened the next year, because the hardest show I've ever done in terms of emotional and what it was required in terms of physical time, I was doing at the same time as my prep. So I really had, I told them I cannot do both. I said, you want this show to be right acting wise, I cannot properly prep and do this. You want to change my schedule? That's the best option. And they went, no, we're fine, we'll just go ahead and do this. And I went through that show, and the other AD kept coming up to me going, what do you want to do about that? I can't talk about this. I think it was the episode where my brother died. And it was just impossible to have other things come into your brain, especially the way that I am, Somebody else, Kevin Branagh could do it. I can't. I told him that. So that was very, very difficult, and I had really no prep time whatsoever, and so that affected things quite a bit.
In an episode of Entourage, I believe you played yourself.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
I was asked if I wanted to do it. I went, yeah. Ari was my agent at the time. Ari Emanuel, that the show is based on.
Right.
Not my personal agent, but I was with that agency and knew Ari fairly well. Interesting now that his brother is the chief of staff at the White House. I was just asked to do that, and so I did. Went up on the set, improvised with Jeremy Piven. I had a great time. I've been asked to go back and have not been able to because of schedule, but fun show.
Was it fun appearing on Saturday Night Live in a parody of The West Wing?
Well, that was we were shooting that on the set with Al Gore, and he was funny, and I was just happy to contribute. And I worked a little bit with Al Franken, who I now see as Senator Al Franken. I've been in his office twice now on the Hill, and I must say I'm very, very impressed with him as a senator. And it's fun to see him there. But he was writing this thing for Al Gore. It was after he lost, or didn't accept his victory, however you look at it. And it was a very funny bit where he's in our Oval Office and he finds himself alone and picks up the phone and starts practicing saying, "Get me Putin. Get me Putin. Get me Putin." And he was really funny and really sweet and charming. And so it was just nice to contribute, and I see it on my IMDb. See, Saturday Night Live. I was on Saturday. Oh yeah, I was on Saturday.
In season 6 of The West Wing, you spoke about, I think when John Wells took over, that one of the huge story arcs that closed out the series was the election between the Alda character and Jimmy Smits. Did you think that was the right way for the show to kind of sort of head toward the ending, head toward a conclusion?
I wasn't watching at that point. I'd lost interest, to be honest. Perfectly understandable that they would do that, and I think people really liked the election, as far as I could tell. I really stopped watching, so I don't know. My storyline was absurd and ridiculous, so they lost me.
Okay.
The storyline I speak of. It's when he was the one that betrayed the president. He was the leak.
For the space shuttle.
For the space weapons, yeah, the space shuttle. And they had told me that there was this really great storyline coming for you. I said, "What is it?" "Oh, we can't tell you." "What do you mean you can't tell me?" "Well, we don't want you to give it away." At which point I looked at, I won't say who, and I said, Are you kidding me?" I said, You think that I'm going to give it away as an actor? What's going on? They were scared to tell me because they knew I'd flip out on them, rightfully so. And it was just against. I go to England. In England, they get it. I go to England, and some people in America go, "Wow, wow, that was so cool, that last scene," and blah blah blah. And I go to England and go, "What were they thinking?" What were they thinking? You wouldn't betray the president in 10 billion years. I go, "No, I wouldn't. Toby would not. Not without 14 episodes worth of fights." Again, go back to give me a reason, and he doesn't just do it because he's Toby. Idiots. It's just, it was maddening. And I think somebody might have thought it was a good idea, a little twist, a little blah, 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 blah. And they didn't realize how bad it was. And then they asked me to try to save it. They said, "Why would Toby have done this?" They actually came to me and said, "Why would he have done this? Are you kidding? You haven't thought of his motives yet?" "Well, we thought we kind of figured it out, but we can't really figure it out." "Well, because he didn't do it." And so what I said was, are we cutting?
Yeah, we're run out of tape.
Okay. It's probably better I don't even